I also want to thank Janet, who has very thoughtfully done a most beautiful shrine, as always, but the cloth is red. And there's a reason for that, because our 3 jewels have different colors, and the red one that we're going to talk about tonight is Sangha. So she's made that for us tonight so we can connect with Sangha through the shrine. So thank you, Janet. Janet's down here. Thank you very much. So we've come to the end tonight. This talk marks the last night of the Wheel of Life, the series that we've had on the Wheel of Life. Sorry, intro course people, you missed that series, but we'll do it again at some point. And you can always catch up if you want to. You can catch up on the recorded talks. But 2 weeks ago, we had a puja last week, but 2 weeks ago, Nagavadri guided us through a way of seeing the culmination of the Buddhist path as a rainbow of color, a spectrum of light and beauty in the form of the jhanas and the pranyas. And if you look at the talk if you want to know what they are. You could see the goal of our practice as embodied in one of the figures of the Buddhas, beautifully serene, endlessly wise and compassionate, uncompromising, and perhaps even fierce sometimes. If we just did that, for some of us, there might be a danger of a misunderstanding. The downside of that could be that we could see the Dharma life as quite a solitary path. There might be a misunderstanding that there's my enlightenment, my practice, and working towards being a figure like that solitary figure up there. And the danger of that is, although it wouldn't be true, that there's a way that we could think about that we would still be in the grip of the big mistake of the separate me in here and the separate everything else out there. That there's me down here and the Buddha up there that is not me. And that way of thinking about it could dig the groove of that big mistake even deeper. So the antidote of that could be to see the Sangha meaning spiritual community, that we practice in. One aspect of Sangha is the spiritual community that we practice in. An antidote of it might be to see the Sangha itself as the goal. Oh, are you all right, Leslie? Yeah, okay. She's got a cough. As the goal of the Dharma life. And in this talk, I'll try and explain how that might work. So as I was saying, we've been looking at the Wheel of Life. And in each of the 6 realms of Samsara, you'll remember that there was a figure in each of them. That was, and some say that that was the Bodhisattva Avalokitesvara, him there. I'll explain a bit more about these things as we go along. And the Buddha Avalokitesvara, oh yeah, I'm going to do it now. So a Bodhisattva, just tell you what a Bodhisattva is. A Bodhisattva is an awakened being, Bodhi meaning awakened and Sattva meaning being. And it's a way of approaching, understanding, for us, of understanding the unfolding of enlightenment by seeing a figure that kind of embodies that unfolding of enlightenment. It's a being that's dedicated to the enlightenment of all beings as well as themselves. So that's what a Bodhisattva is dedicated to. And one example of a Bodhisattva is Avalokitesvara. He who hears the cries of the world, is his name means. You might also remember that this Bodhisattva Avalokitesvara is the embodiment, the myth of our order and movement, and that each one of us could be a hand of Avalokitesvara, and that together we can be a force for great good in the world. And it's something that we can't do alone. So this is Avalokitesvara, and he appears in each of the realms, offering something that will help the beings suffering in each realm. Something that will bring them into contact with the only thing that will really help, which is the 3 jewels, the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. So how would it be if we could see our Sangha as Avalokitesvara, not just as a metaphor or a symbol, but literally Avalokitesvara. And this is actually what Sanghagita, the founder of our order, actually did envision. And people coming out of the talk where he first shared this vision said, did he really mean that? This must have been in the 70s. Did he really mean that the order is Avalokitesvara? And they were like, I don't know, I think so. And it was like, wow, that was a big thing to say. Not just a symbol, actually is a bodhisattva of compassion. And that we are one of his compassionate hands. So a bodhisattva is an enlightened being specially dedicated to the awakening of all beings. And it's important that lots of people talk about, and I get this now in a way that I might have not done a few years ago, a personal myth, a way of seeing our practice, a big way of seeing our practice that holds and contains our practice in a vast, overarching way that kind of makes sense of our experience as we go along. A way of seeing that fits with the Buddha's vision of how things are, something of great beauty and meaning that we can live our lives by. We can think of a Dharma warrior, for example, or a Dharma magician, or a witch, or a queen, or a servant, or a healer, all in service of the Dharma. This big vision that holds our practice and gives us energy to move forward. And what better myth could I suggest for us than to see our part in the Sangha, in our part in the spiritual community, as creating the Bodhisattva Avalokitesvara. So Tsongkhapa, who was a medieval teacher who appears on our tree of refuge and respect, so he's an important figure for us that we can gain inspiration from. He said, there is a fault in practicing just for oneself, which means that you do not benefit and others do not benefit either. There is great merit in practicing for others, which means that you benefit and others benefit also. So the easiest way for us to go beyond a motivation that's all about myself, my enlightenment, is to make our practice more about creating Sangha, helping to gather a community, a spiritual community, and being a positive, constructive participant in that community. Vajratara, years ago, a fantastic woman who helped found this Sangha, used to talk about the mantra of me. And she used to say, you hear the mantra of me coming over the mountains and you can hear people singing it. And it's all about me, 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 the mantra of me. And this just has such a good antidote to that, which isn't helpful. And that was it's 20 odd years ago when she talked about the mantra of me. How much stronger now is the mantra of me with, what we see in society. So we can have an antidote to that, a practice that involves others. And for us, that's Sangha, that's us, our spiritual community. The Bodhisattva that represents our Sangha is Avalokitesvara, and we can practice to build Sangha by being a hand of Avalokitesvara. And this gorgeous vision ties in with the myth of the Pure Land. So I'm not going to say too much about the Pure Land, because you could do a retreat, you could do a 10-year retreat on a Pure Land, or a Buddha field. Use those two names interchangeably, Pure Land, Buddha field. The myth of the Pure Land. And what we build as a hand of Avalokitesvara in Sheffield becomes a Pure Land. So there's a whole school of Pure Land practice. So a Pure Land is kind of collected around either a Buddha or a Bodhisattva. So it's a sphere of being, of perhaps could call it energy, could call it practice, could call it activity, consciousness. You could call it influence, which is developed around a Buddha or a Bodhisattva. A Pure Land. And in that sphere, everything supports growth towards enlightenment. A Pure Land is where the Dharma thrives. Why not imagine Sheffield Sangha as a Pure Land of Avalokitesvara? Why not? Traditionally, a Pure Land is a place of great beauty. There are trees made of jewels and mountains made of diamond and crystal. There are bubbling springs of sweet water that sing the Dharma. And music plays that speaks the Dharma and teaches the Dharma. You don't have to work to earn your living. You just reach out your hand and nutritious food just appears in your hands. All your needs are met, so that all you have to do is practice. All you have to do is listen to the Dharma sung by the birds and in the rustlings of the leaves of the trees. It's really easy to gain enlightenment. And different Buddhas and Bodhisattvas have different Pure Lands, different spheres of influence. And, it's a whole way of developing a myth that people do in different countries around the world. It's a big thing. So there are loads of different Pure Lands. Well, we could imagine Sheffield Buddhist Centre as a Pure Land of Avalokitesvara. So how do you create a Pure Land? Well, you create a Pure Land with people. People create a Pure Land who are growing and developing. If we're growing and developing towards freedom, then we are developing a Pure Land. Human beings make a Pure Land, us. And the foundation of that is mutual helpfulness. People coming together who have shared aspirations that help each other grow. And we've seen in the series how getting off the wheel of samsara and onto the spiral path is the aim of the Dharma life. We've learned about how acting ethically leads to more open, more expansive mental states, and that being in the gap gets you to those more expansive, open mental states, and choosing a course that is ethical and skillful over unskillfulness, which leads to unhappiness and being stuck on the wheel of life. But if we are able to get off the wheel, then we're in mental states of increasing beauty and wisdom. So how on the spiral path that takes us off, and Nagavajri talked about at the end of that path there being a Buddha, and I'm talking about at the end of that path being a Sangha. But if we have the goal of that spiral path as a Pure Land of Avalokitesvara, then the path and the goal become the same thing. They become one and the same thing. Becoming part of the thousand-armed Avalokitesvara is about creating his Pure Land by ethical action, by working, by practicing together for each other here at Sheffield Buddhist Centre. Now, this was the inspiration of the founder of our order, Sanghagita. He had a vision in the 60s and developed it over the 70s and the 80s of a new society, which has kind of changed and developed over the years, but the fundamentals are the same. How it's expressed has changed, but the fundamentals is the same, based around the idea that that comes as a way of living as practice. And this is the first thing I'm going to talk about, the 3 C's. Those who've been practicing for a long time will recognize the 3 C's. The 3 C's are communities, cooperatives, and centers. Now, cooperatives has changed, the name of that changed because what developed was, it was clear that it was a team-based right livelihood. So you learned on the intro course about right livelihood, you did a whole section on right livelihood, didn't you? How important it is to have a right livelihood. Well, cooperatives are now, for a long time have been called team-based right livelihoods. And I'm just going to say a bit about each one, in saying how this can help to build a Pure Land. So in the work aspect, in the cooperatives, the team-based right livelihood, I'm going to say idea, but it's not an idea, it's true and real, that work is practice, that there's no separation between me at work, or me at the Buddhist Centre, or me anywhere else. that work as practice comes together. And in these team-based right livelihoods, we start the day with the refuges and precepts. Can you imagine that, going to work and the first thing you do is you chant the refuges and precepts? It's just fantastic. It's fantastic. And I was very, very fortunate to be able to work in a team-based right livelihood in Sheffield for 5 years. What we used to have Evolution that was in town. You might remember that. Anyway, we started the day with the refuges and precepts, and we ended with the transference of merit. And the idea that Sanghagita said was like, we're all like rough-edged stones that get thrown together in a tumbler, and the rough edges get smoother and more beautiful, and gems are created out of the tumbler. And that was true. Team-based right livelihood isn't easy. It's tough. You have to stay ethical. Well, you don't have to do anything, but you make the choice to stay ethical when you're under really a lot of pressure to get things done. Being kind and aware of each other under that pressure. Amoghavamsa began, I think, probably the first team-based right livelihood in Sheffield with the Christmas shops. He used to have a Christmas shop every year and ran them. And he could tell you a lot about how it was to stay ethical and stay kind and aware when you've got a queue out the door and people want their Christmas trees or whatever it might be. But it's also really good fun. Sheffield Buddhist Centre is run as a team-based right livelihood. And so we had a Windhorse Evolution. Evolution sold things like homeware, like cushions and wind chimes, things like that. We had to close, but we were actually really successful. And it supported people training for ordination, and I was actually ordained from there when I worked in Evolution. When we had a cafe, that was a team-based right livelihood, and the whole point of them going to work every day was to make money to give away. That was the whole point, and they did it. We have Still Learning here, which is still working as a company that teaches Buddhism to children and students. And if you're interested, we still need people for that. So that's a team-based right livelihood that runs from here that anybody here could ask to join in with and support. We've always wanted a charity shop in Sheffield. We've been wanting a charity shop for years. And Auntie Katie's smiling at me because she and I and Bodhi Naga have tried again and again, but it's not happened yet, but it will. Anybody here who wants to open a charity shop, there'd be support. So a team-based right livelihood as a way of creating a pure land. Set one up. Just set one up, Amoghavamsa did. See if you can do it. Creating conditions where work is practice for the benefit of others and then giving away the profit. So communities. We have several communities in Sheffield. We've got a men's community and a women's community and mixed communities. People living together and practicing together, eating together, meditating, puja together. Extremely challenging. I helped to set one up, the women's community in Sheffield, and lived in it for 10 years. Extremely challenging and extremely fantastic. Just a fantastic way to live. Really good in the face of increasing cost and to the environment. One washing machine between 7 women. A small example of how costs are reduced, less harm to the environment, and a fantastic way to practice with each other, setting up conditions for the Pure Land in every single moment of your day. So we see through our conditioning and how things should be done by living with other people, with a deep commitment to living out the vision of creating conditions for growth for each other. So, you could try a door-knocking Karana appeal. Great combination of team-based right livelihood and community. Volunteering at retreat centres. Women, if you're interested, Taraloka always need volunteers. I don't know about the other centres, but Taraloka is always grateful for volunteers. So that's communities. So you might not have the conditions in your life to live in a community. You might not want to. That's absolutely fine. You don't have to live in a community, and it's just one way of practicing. Luckily, in our movement, we We have lots and lots of different ways of practicing family, living alone, whatever. That's not the most important thing. The most important thing is commitment to practice. So, but we do have to look at our conditions. Everything arises out of conditions. So how do we make our life conducive to becoming a hand of Avalokitesvara? So we might not be able to live in a community, we might not be able to work in a team-based right livelihood, but we have a center. So this is how it can be helpful to people who want to be able to create those conditions, but can't work or live together. So how this center was founded and still run is based on a teaching from the Buddha called the 4 Samghagita Vastus. It's a big one, isn't it? So it's not Sangha. You hear people saying Sanghagita Vastus. It's not that. It's a different word. 4 Samghagita Vastus. So this, so the 3 C's are like a blueprint for a vision of how the world could be. A framework, and the framework for centers is based around the 4 Samghagita Vastus. So I'll just tell you the story of how they came about. So Hataka was a disciple of the Buddha, lived at the time of the Buddha, and the Buddha wandered hundreds of miles teaching through his life. He walked for hundreds of miles. He was always teaching. We think of him as kind of seated, but actually he spent most of his time walking, because he was walking as wherever he could to teach the Dharma. And he walked to a place where a man called Hataka lived. And he taught him, and then he moved on. And then years and years later, the Buddha came back again to where Hataka lived and where he taught him, and found that he had been really, really inspired by what the Buddha had taught him, because Hataka had this massive Sangha. He'd created out of nothing a huge Sangha of people who were practicing the Dharma, the Buddha's Dharma. And he was teaching the Dharma as taught to him by the Buddha. It wasn't like he was a guru thing. He hadn't got all his fans, you know, it wasn't like that. He was skillfully and faithfully teaching the Buddha's Dharma. And the Buddha said to him, "How did you do it?" And he said, "Well, I just did what you told me to do. I did what you told me," which was to practice the Samghagita Vastus of generosity, affectionate speech, beneficial activity, and exemplification. So it was all, Hataka explained everything. I just responded to what was needed. And when I met somebody who needed these things, that's what I gave them. That's what I did. And I taught others to do the same thing. So the Sangha grew and grew and grew based on these 4 things. So generosity. Generosity is a means of communication. Give what you can. And the flow of giving means that we receive what we need. So dana, the first one, is about giving what you can and receiving what you need, so that there's no giver, there's no receiver, and there's nothing given. So mull that one over in your groups. So the thing is about generosity is there's always that thing, isn't there? You know, or should I give? I should give because I feel bad if I don't, or I give to be liked. But Hataka would give even if it's not because he wanted that person to stay. You know, he wasn't giving because he wanted to build his Sangha up. He just gave because he just gave. Otherwise, it's not dana. Dana is not an exchange. It's not, I'll give you that if you give me this. That's not dana. It's a flow of giving and receiving. So kindly, affectionate speech. The importance of speech in creating the world that we live in, it's so important, isn't it? When we're surrounded by harsh speech, it makes us defensive, and we're much more likely to speak like that. So we notice the world that's created by the speech that we hear. and the speech that we use. And you might be thinking, oh yeah, I've got examples in my life where there is quite a lot of harsh speech, and my speech is different when I'm there. That's interesting, isn't it? How that can be. Or when it's really beautiful, when it's skillful and beautiful, what a difference that makes. So we're creating beauty and ugliness by the speech that we use. And the Buddhist practice of rejoicing really cuts into this. We rejoice in each other, which creates beauty and an atmosphere of ease. So beneficial activity. Traditionally, especially the Dharma, sharing the Dharma, receiving the Dharma is the most beneficial thing that could ever happen to us. And it's the most important thing that you could ever share with anyone else. But also, it's just all the helping, just doing what needs to be done, noticing something needs to be done and doing it. That's the beneficial activity, and building that into what we do. Exemplification, walking the talk, living in a way that accords with what we say. So obviously we can't do that all the time. We are unskillful. I am unskillful a lot. And I can stand up here and try and connect with the truth of what I'm trying to say. But most of the time I can't live up to that. So people ask Sanghagita about that. They asked him, what do you do? Because there's no way I can go around like being perfect all the time. It's just never going to happen. And he said, no, of course, that's not going to happen. But what you can do is exemplify the process that you're in. So when you make mistakes, admit that you've made mistakes and try and put things right. Don't pretend that you're perfect when you're not. You're growing, you're changing, and exemplify that. And that's what we mean by exemplification. Exemplifying your practice, that you're trying to do your best as honestly as you can. And when Sheffield Buddhist Centre was created, it was the Sanghagita that it was based on, that it is based on. And it's so important that we all know that and we all realize that this is the way that Sheffield Buddhist Centre runs is directly based on this. And if these aren't ticked in anything that we decide to set up, we don't do it. If it's not building Sangha, we don't do it. And when the Sheffield Buddhist Centre was set up, the people said, there's no way, no one is ever going to have to pay to hear the Dharma. The Dharma has to be given freely, and no one is ever going to have to pay for that. That was clear, and the emphasis on building Sangha was clear and is clear. And it's still the basis of everything that we do. So we can be part of that, and we can help create conditions for people to come together in our Sangha as part of that vision that would create a Pure Land right here in Sheffield. And each of us can be a hand of Avalokitesvara in his Pure Land, being generous, friendly in our speech, helping out with activities, and trying to exemplify what it's like to grow and change, and do our best to walk the talk. And I explained about that. So we have a vision of communities, team-based right livelihoods and centres, and the heart of our practice based around the 4 Samgriha Vastus. To the extent that we practice, to that extent we build a Pure Land. To that extent, we become a hand of Avalokitesvara. And you notice at the heart, he holds the Chintamani. This is so beautiful. If you just look at it, the way he's holding it, so precious and so beautiful. Can you imagine holding something that is the most precious thing that you could ever hold in your hand? He's holding that in his hands. And this is the bodhicitta. He's holding the bodhicitta, the bodhi, that word again, awakened. Bodhicitta, the chitta being the heart, mind. So he is holding the awakened heart, mind right there. And out of that comes the hands that can go out into the world. And this arises, the bodhicitta is symbolized as a jewel there, but it's not a thing. It's so hard to describe. It arises in the human heart, mind. It's a desire / urge / will, but there's no me that can will it. So it's so hard to explain, but it's to create conditions for the end of suffering, for all beings to be at the end of suffering, and for them to rise to their highest potential for enlightenment, for the happiness and welfare of all beings. That is the bodhicitta, and that can arise in the human heart. It's the only place it can arise. It can only arise in the human heart and mind. It's actually in us already. We already have that jewel sewn into our coats, but we just don't know it's there. We just have to know it's there and practice so that it will arise in us. We just have to allow it to be revealed by practice. It's not something you can think your way to. It's mysterious and beautiful. It's a turning about in the way that we see the world. No me, no separate you. We stop being lost in that mistake of separateness. And it comes out of consistent practice of ethics, meditation, and wisdom. And when we see the world like that, there is just practice, as Bhante said, simply and solely for its own irresistible sake. Couldn't resist putting in my favorite quotation. It's most likely to happen in groups. Now that's interesting, isn't it? To be part of a bodhisattva, we need to have a glimmer of that. We need to have a glimmer of that awakening that happens in a group. You know, you might be part of a positive community, and that's lovely. It's really great to be in a positive community. It's really fantastic, and there's nothing wrong with it. But it can't be a spiritual community unless we're practicing for the arising of the bodhicitta in each other. A community without that would just be polishing the wheel of samsara, trying to make samsara work for us, which is very tempting. But ultimately, it's not going to work, and it's unsatisfactory, and it won't get us off the wheel and onto the spiral path. We need to practice meditation, wisdom, and ethics. And the more we're in touch with that glimmer of the bodhicitta, the more of a Pure Land we are. And centers could become the nucleus of a new society. Sanghagita said, we need to have an aspiration that a center should serve a more noble, radical, even revolutionary function than simply giving people their spiritual vitamins to help them stagger along on the path of worldliness for the few days. Any center associated with the movement I founded is intended to be nothing less than the nucleus of a new society. And he believed, and I believe, that if we do it here, it will go out into society. It does go out into society. We take it out into our work. We take it out into the place everywhere that we go. And what we do here makes a difference. He also said the Buddha Land is individuals living in free association with one another, inspired by the principles of great compassion and transcendental wisdom, above all by the bodhicitta, the will to enlightenment for all beings. Creating conditions for no separation. And the Sheffield Buddhist Centre has a strong lineage of this, and we just have to step in the stream. It's very special. From the intro course through all our activities, we take responsibility for our connections with each other. Is the idea of a Pure Land so strange and so far removed? Is jewel trees and the sound of the Dharma floating on the breeze so far removed from our actual experience? I remember in the community in Freedom Road, standing at the window with Dharma Mai after meditation, and the tree was full of jewels. It was. We were like, oh, we've created a Pure Land. But it was just because we'd been meditating and the tree was beautiful and glimmering in the sunlight. How many times have you thought, I'm too tired, I can't be bothered, don't want to go to the center, but you come and then you feel so much better because you've been, Jenny's smiling at me. She says that a lot. Because we're with people with a shared aspiration in a beautiful building created by us. And were you one of the people doing the inspiring, as well as being one who's inspired? Have you ever come to Sangha night or a festival with a tub of hummus and ended up with a massive plate of delicious food, like in a restaurant. You know, it's just reaching your hand out for nutritious food, and there it is. It's not that far removed from a Pure Land. Have you ever listened to a talk, and I know this is true, that Kate has said this many times, and it's exactly what you need to hear. It's like you just turned up and you got exactly what you needed. Pure Land. Could this be your myth? Being generous, friendly, helping with activities, walking the talk, or equally important, receiving generosity. Equally important, receiving friendliness and the gratitude that might arise from that, for having such companions in the holy life. Joining in the activities, noticing skillfulness and appreciating it and telling them so. Every time we give something or receive something, do it consciously, rejoicing in our great good fortune. That we're living out our myth of the Sangha as the goal of the Dharma life, a creation of a Pure Land right here in Sheffield. So you might want to ask in the groups about what you can contribute. Whoever's leading the groups will be able to, tell you. So how you might want to talk in your groups about how you can contribute more consciously to creating Sangha, creating a Pure Land. You might want to ask questions about, the Samgara Vastus. How can you consciously be on the receiving end of this incredible, great good fortune that we have to be in this stream of beauty and goodness that has been created for us by the people who set up this. And just another shout out from Avalokitesvara, who was a very important part of that, who's sitting at the back there. So yes, that's it. That's my talk.